muted, but you can ask questions at the end. And David, if you can confirm, you can see my screen and you can see the presentation.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. All right. So Bianca Barga here. I was working with Lux Collection previously, which is a sales representation company. We had around 70 hotels around the world. As I said before, my background is revenue management, sales, and distribution. Most recently, I was doing distribution. And David, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep. So currently, I'm actually furloughed as well, but working for the Courtyard World Trade Center out in Manhattan as a revenue manager there. Prior to that, I was working with the Marriott RMAS support team, so remote solution support. And then my initial background comes from front office operations. So kind of have that crossroad and putting both together. So we're going to talk kind of about how front office and STR report really is important for front office as well, not just revenue managers.
Yeah, and again, we are recording this this presentation. This is the first, so if there are any hiccups, please forgive us. We are still learning how to deal with Zoom a little bit. Although we did a lot of happy hours, it's still new for us in terms of sharing things, etc. So apologies in advance. So everybody's muted. You can ask questions at the end, and let's get to it. So what does STR report stand for? And let me go here. This is not easy for me. So STR report was founded actually in 1985. It's the most used benchmark report in the industry. I'd say a lot of hotels in the US and the major city use it. They say that they have more than 67,000 hotels that report data. So basically what it is, it compares your hotel to other properties, and the other properties you can choose. We are going to go over the specifics of what you need to have to report to STR and also to receive the reports. But if you don't use the STR report, the only way you're going to compare yourself is to really measure your performance is to your budget, which you create, or to your performance from last year. So let's say, you know, your budget starts in June, you're going to create that budget and you're going to measure yourself the following year against that budget. But you never know what your competitors are doing if you don't have access to the STR report. So the way it works, you submit your data manually or automatically, depending on if you work for a brand or if you work for an independent hotel. A lot of hotels still do the data entry manually. You do it by Monday, and on Tuesday, you receive the previous week STR report. You also have monthly reports. You also have year reports. But on a weekly basis, what we really analyze is your performance for the previous week. You receive it every Tuesday. Again, you can have monthly, yearly, and the major goal is to compare yourself with the competitors that you choose on a weekly basis. And David, please chime in if you want, of course, if I forgot something. We are going to talk more about the specifics and what the report goes over. So let's go to the next slide. A couple of the guidelines for the STR reports. And one important thing to think about is that you'll never be able to understand one competitor occupancy, ADR, or RevPAR. What you're going to see on the STR report is yourself, your numbers compared to your competitors' average numbers. So you need a minimum of 4 competitors. So like this, you can't guess who is doing what. So when you report to the STR report, you're going to ask them, if you're in LA, does Hotel X report, does Hotel Y report, does Hotel M report, and if they report, you can include them in your competitive set. It's interesting because if you go to a small town, you're going to run into a lot of cases that hotels don't report. So of course, if they don't report, you cannot have them in your competitive set. For competitors, because again, if you have less competitors, it would be easier to try to figure out who is doing what. And one important thing too is that it's really key for you to choose the right competitive set from the start. You can change your competitive set down the road, meaning that, let's say my hotel is opening this year, and then 6 months down the road, I figure out that the competitive set that I chose is not good. So in 6 months, I want you to change my competitive set. You can absolutely do that. You have to change a minimum of 2 hotels. But as Director of Revenue Management, we don't recommend that because you lose the accuracy of your data in the sense that next year, you're not going to be able to look back and really compare apples to apples. So that's why it's so important from the start to have the right competitive set. And what is the right competitive set? We tell hotels, and this is really by STR recommendations, to choose other hotels that are the same class or the same chain segments. So if you have a 4-star hotel in LA and you only have 3-star competitors, you're probably not going to be comparing apples to apples. Or if you're a 3-star hotel and you only have 5 hotels in your competitive set, that's probably not going to play in your favor. So what we recommend is to really choose hotels that are aligned with you, also that offer the same amenities and that are located in the same geographical area. And some of you, maybe if you're in sales, you already run into the problem that if you have a mountain hotel or a resort that's completely remote, you don't have other people to compete with. So when that happens, there are exceptions and you can compare yourself to hotels that are located in a different geographical area. But the main guidelines is that if you're in a big city or if you have hotels that are similar to you that are within a certain mile radius, that's what we recommend that you put in your competitive set. Also, hotels that have similar rates. So again, if you have a 4-star hotel, but you don't have all the amenities that other 4-star hotel has, they're probably selling a much higher rate, and that is going to impact your performance on the star report. One thing that's pretty tedious, especially if you're in an independent hotel and you need to put everything manually, is that the first time that you enter your data, we recommend entering your last year's data. We're going to see in a moment here on the reports that when you're analyzing it, you also have your last year's numbers that you can look at. And if you don't have those numbers there, you're going to be missing out on very valuable data. If you work for a chain, the report is usually uploaded automatically, so you don't have that issue. But if you do have to do it manually, it is tedious, it takes a little bit of time, but the data that you're going to be getting out of it is very valuable. So we encourage you to do that. And I'd say probably the most important part of this slide here is that the report, and we're going to see it, is going to give you the performance by segment. So you're going to have transient segment, which are the people that come in on individual bookings, corporate or leisure. You also have the groups, which have to be by STR guidelines, 10 rooms or more. And you have your contract, which is usually crew, but anything that you have that comes on a weekly basis to your hotel every week consistently, that's considered as contract. So those are the 3 segments that the STAR report provides in terms of segmentation data for you. However, if you don't do a good job managing your data at the hotel, so if you're at the front desk and someone comes from a corporate account and you put segmentation group, or if you put segmentation contract, the same data that you're putting in your system is going to be reported on STAR. So garbage in, garbage out, you really need to make sure that your data is accurate and that everything that's being entered in the system is being entered correctly. Otherwise, the STAR is not going to do any miracles for you. Did I forget anything, David?
No, that sounds good. And just kind of to piggyback off that, an example would be if you're looking at your STAR report and you see that your comp set, I'm sorry, that yourself, you had maybe 20% group in-house, but your STAR report's only showing that you have 8% group. That's a time where you want to go check with that front desk and make sure that they are coding things properly. So especially from sales teams, you know, it's obviously very important that you are getting your segmentation proper so that the results are coming back and then you can see how you're doing next year when coding groups.
Yes. Unfortunately, that's something that in hospitality, I think we don't do a good enough job to really take care of our data. The way that we enter information, it's very loose. Sometimes we don't have time to train the teams properly. So again, if you're at a hotel and you're working right now, that's a good time to do that and train everybody so they're entering the data correctly. So when it comes to analyzing the data, you have the right numbers to look at. So let's talk about the basics. And again, for some people, this is going to be a little bit tedious, but if you don't necessarily work in sales or the front desk or revenue management, you're not familiar with these numbers, what they stand for and how we calculate them most importantly. So ADR, average daily rates, and the way that you calculate it is that your total room revenue divided by the total number of rooms occupied at your hotel. So if you had $100,000 per day, that's a really nice revenue, and you have 100 rooms, so it's going to be $100,000 that you made up in revenue today divided by 100 rooms that were occupied today. Your hotel can have 200 rooms, 100 rooms are occupied, so you divide one by the other. That's your average daily rate. In terms of occupancy, goes around the same. It's the total numbers of rooms occupied divided by the total number of rooms you have available at the hotel. In the RevPAR, the most simple way to calculate it is to really get your ADR and multiply it by your occupancy. The terms that you might not be familiar with are the MPI, ARI, and RGI, which are terms that you're going to see on the STAR report. And what they stand for is Market Penetration Index for your occupancy. So it's really your occupancy divided by your competitive set's occupancy, the average of the 4 hotels, or if you decide to have more hotels, their average. So again, you're never going to be able to do one hotel's occupancy. You're never going to be able to find that out. It's always going to be the average of the hotels you chose to be in your competitive set. Then you have the ARI, which is the average rate index, or your rate divided by your competitive set's average rate. And the RGI, which is the most important number. And all the owners look at this, and I have Joy here, who is our previous CEO for our company. This is what owners and potential buyers look at, which is the revenue generation index, or your RevPAR divided by your competitive set's average RevPAR. Again, this is such an important number because it's going to really tell potential buyers or potential management companies or even your general manager how you're doing in terms of managing your occupancy and your rate. And we're going to talk more about that in the next slides too. And one thing that also STAR report shows you is the percentage change, meaning that you're going to be able to tell how you're doing year over year in comparison to yourself, how your competitors are doing in comparison to themselves year over year, and then yourself compared to the other hotels. And this is going to be more clear on the next slides here when you see a little bit of the report. One thing that when Dave and I were putting this presentation together, we wanted to make sure is that if you choose 4 hotels to be your competitors, the numbers are not going to be your numbers divided by 4. It's really your occupancy divided by their average of their occupancy, your rate divided by average of the rates. So we just wanted to make sure that you keep that in mind because it's not divided by 5 and you're going to get the number. And I think it's going to be, again, more clear on the next slide that we're going to go over. David, I know you put this together. Anything else that you would like to mention on this slide?
Yeah, just really what Bianca's meaning when she's saying it's not the average divided by 5 is, for example, if you look at your occupancy numbers here, you see 91%, 87%, 85%. And then at the bottom, you see the total occupancy for the market. So the total number of rooms divided by the total number of, or the total number of rooms sold divided by the total number of rooms. When you're getting your occupancy index, you're not just going to be averaging out this divided by 5. What you need to do is really calculate the entire market's occupancy, then divide your occupancy by the market. So I'm not sure how these numbers would have worked out because these are just kind of dummy numbers, but typically if you just happen to take 91, 87, 85, 95, 89, 88% and divide it by 6, it may come out to 88%, but a lot of times it will not. So your market occupancy can be different than just the basic average calculation of your comp set and yourself.
Right. And again, if you have any questions, we can address them at the end of the presentation. And can go to, there you go. So we got to it. This is one sample of the STAR report. So this is one tab. There are several tabs, and David is going to cover that with you next. But I just wanted to give you an overview of this main tab here on the report, which is probably the first thing we look at. So you can tell here that this report is from this year, so the week from January 19th until January 25th. You have the segmentation tab, so you're going to see the results here for transient, group, contract, and then your total. The way that we report it is you have, we look at the report is that you have your property, then you have your competitive set, and then you have the index, which if you remember is your property divided by the competitive set. And then you're going to have the percentage index here. Same goes for rates and same goes for RevPAR. So also the change year over year that I mentioned before, the percentage change, this is how you're performing in comparison to yourself from last year, how your competitive set is doing in comparison to themselves from last year, and then where you stand when it comes to last year versus your competitive set. One thing that we always look at, obviously, if you're a revenue manager, this is the number that you're going to go first with your revenue generator index. So if you understand correctly, and what we wanted to drive home too is that, and David explained to me as we were talking, and now I'm thinking about this because it's almost lunchtime here, you want to make sure that you have the right piece of your pie. So let's say we have a pizza here, and you have your competitive set, you want to make sure that your slice of pizza is as big or bigger than your competitors. And if anybody's hungry, I hope that stays with you. But what we want to see here, ideally, is that your RGI is above 100%. And what does that mean? That means that you're getting your piece of the pie in comparison to your competitors. If you're below 100%, it means that your competitors are doing better than you in the market. And of course, you're seeing all the percentages here because you want to see if you're getting your fair share in occupancy, in rate, and in RevPAR. And a lot of times, and we can see it here if you're paying attention to the numbers, and I can see, I'm going to go over the total numbers here, not into the segmentation, but you can see that your property is doing much better in terms of occupancy. You're coming in for that specific week at almost 84% occupancy. Your competitive set's coming with 67%, meaning that your occupancy is doing much better than your competitive set. So you're getting way better than your fair share. You're getting 125%. But in terms of rate, your property is doing $144, while the average of your competitive set is doing $209. So in rate, you're really not getting your fair share. And maybe that's the strategy for the hotel, but ideally, what we would want to see is a RevPAR higher than your competitive set. But as you can tell here, your RevPAR is coming at 120, which is your occupancy times the ADR. But your competitive set, because they have such a higher rate than yours, they're coming at 139.47. So you end up with a 86.7 index, overall index, and that's not necessarily good. And David is going to go over this reporting specifically in detail. But ideally, what we would have is to have a property with more than 100% index. Depending on your competitive set, let's say you're the only 3-star hotel in a city. There are only 5-star hotels. I've never seen that happen, but let's say that it exists. You are never probably going to get your RevPAR index. If the 5-star hotels run very high occupancy, it's going to be pretty much impossible for you to get your RevPAR index, because if they have high occupancy and if they have high rate and you're a 3-star property, it's going to be really hard to achieve that RevPAR index share. But depending on your situation, you might have less than 100% as your goal. Not recommended. We always want to see you compared to hotels that are similar to you, so you can aim for that 100%. One thing that we also wanted to show you here is that it's very important to not ignore your performance year over year. So this 4.1% means that you beat your competitive set in terms of growth year over year. You, in terms of RevPAR, grew 9.4%. Your competitive set grew 5.1%, meaning that you grew more than them year over year. And that's a really important number to see too. Let's say you're a new hotel or there was a big shakeup in the market, coronavirus, and next year you're going to be outperforming. So it's just a very important number to see. And sometimes people, especially owners and general managers, they tend to ignore it. And we try to drive home how important it is to have a positive number here, especially in comparison to your competitors year over year. Again, there are certain, I just thought about coronavirus, it's going to be a positive year over year for everyone because everybody's closed and dead right now. But if it was another situation that last year you struggled, let's say now you have a new groups person and you're going to really track that performance, you want to see the number here for groups to improve year over year because you have a new person in sales that is doing groups. So you should track that number very closely too. And again, it's something that we sometimes ignore, but it should be as important as the index itself. David, did I forget anything?
Sounds good.
All right. So do you want to take over from here?
Yeah, I can take from here. Thank you, Bianca. Great job. So really, kind of what Bianca said, ideally your hotel is going to be looking for that 100%. And a term that you're going to hear revenue managers say a lot is fair share. We got our fair share. We didn't get our fair share. And what fair share, to what Bianca was saying, is over 100 or under 100. So thinking of that pizza pie, if your fair share is 8 equal slices, if we got over 100%, we got over our fair share. If we got under 100%, then we got under our fair share, meaning we got more or less of that pie. So you can see the two reports here. This is the left side being the report we just looked at, the right side being another report, 2 sample reports that we were able to capture online. And you can see hotel number 2, in comparison to hotel number 1, ran a 121 index. So you look at that bottom right number. Bianca, I don't know if you can put the cursor over there. You go. Thank you. So you see they ran a 121. So we would say we got more than our fair share in the market. We grew 29.8%. So this hotel did a really great job. You can see their strategy most likely was to drop some rate. So you can see their rate came down 8.5% to a 305 compared to a 4.4% drop from the market, but they grew 24.4% in occupancy. So this is kind of the beginning of the conversations that revenue managers are going to be having, both from themselves, with their entire teams, and with their corporate teams. As the report, we'll see in different sections of the report, this gets into more detail from a segmentation standpoint, both by date and by day of week. And that really is the beginning of our drive into figuring out what caused this, whether it be a positive or a negative. But as long as we're getting that 100% both across all three, occupancy, ADR, and RevPAR, at least that's the goal, we're doing pretty good. Now, I will say of these two things, and Bianca, you can correct me if I'm wrong, while we love to see 100%, some of the bigger numbers is actually the percent change. So as you can see on the left side, we're at 86.7, as Bianca pointed out, but we see 4.1% growth. So that means if we're looking at that pizza pie, we still got a smaller share of the pizza pie than everybody else, but we took more this year than we had last year. So that's showing positive progression. We're trending in the upward direction. That's going to really be a big number to tell our story. And a lot of times, even if we're seeing ourselves under 100, if we're seeing that positive number, the conversations do go a little bit easier. And Bianca, again, correct me if I'm wrong on that. So the next slide should be showing us, see as it comes through. Yep.
Yes, and I'm going to get the report for you.
And again, this is our first time running these through, so just kind of bear with us. But again, this is our sample hotel. So this is the hotel that did really good. And as you can see here, this is showing us by day of week. So every week, as Bianca said, the report comes out on Tuesday. It shows us the previous week. This is the main glance tab. So this is comparing Sunday to Sunday of last year. So what that means is it's not comparing by date, meaning if it's the first of the week. So for example, this is December 18th to December 24th. We all know this is Christmas time. Christmas time, of course, is always on the 25th, but it changes days of week. So we have to keep that in mind as we're looking at these reports, because Friday, for example, will be compared to Friday. So assuming that the calendar usually works how it does, last year, this would have been Christmas Eve. This year, it's the 23rd. So conversely, Saturday is now Christmas Eve. Last year would have been Christmas. How does that impact your hotel? It all varies based on the market, but it's important to remember because your dates and your scores can change drastically based on what's happening in that particular week. As holidays shift, as citywide conventions come in, as groups come and go. So it's very important to remember that we're looking here at day of week over day of week, not date. And as we can see here, a lot of our occupancy growth came on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. We had some ADR growth on Monday and Wednesday. And then you can see at the bottom of the RevPAR running all the way through. Now, under this week section is a very important section. You can see it's the running 28 days. So this is going to show you the same information by day of week, but it's going to show you over the previous running 28. So this kind of gives you that trend. This will kind of tell you, hey, you know, over the last 4 or so weeks, we're trending up. You can see we're doing a 28.5% growth in RevPAR. We're growing 28% in occupancy. So a week, the top part, which is by week, is a snapshot. A lot of time we want to see great numbers there, but there could be things that happen that show negative numbers. Again, maybe you had a huge group that didn't return. The running 28 shows you this trend. So you can kind of see, okay, you know what? We had a bad week last week for whatever reason. We should know the reason. But our running 28 is still trending positively. So you know what? We're going to obviously need to work harder, but we understand kind of why that happened. And we're still showing positive trends. So everything is not as bad as that 1 week snapshot shows. Conversely, if we're seeing a running 28 with a negative RGI, but we have a 1 week that's really good, we're saying, okay, we did good this week. We know why we did good. Let's try to continue that and turn this running 28 around. So those are both really 2 strong sections to look at on this glance tab. On the next tab, you're going to see the same information, but it's going to show us by day. So you can see here, starting at the top of the month, December 1st, all the way to the 24th. Now, Something important to keep in mind here, I said on the glance, and I learned this one the hard way, I said on the glance that it refers to day of week over day of week. This here is showing date over date. So first to the first, second to second. And I actually had to call STR and learn that one myself when I saw some discrepancies in my report. But it's showing the same information, but broken out every day. So now you're not just looking at that 1 week snapshot. You're not looking at a combined running 28. You can literally go back and pinpoint day by day how you did. Now, why is this important? Because you want to obviously see a day by day breakdown, but you're also going to use this information next year if you're quoting groups. It's one of the first things I look at when I'm quoting groups, and I'm going to go back and say, okay, on XY date, I did XY occupancy at XY rate. This is the first part of kind of doing those group quotes. And then it gets a little bit more detailed when it comes to looking at the segmentation of your information last year, which we're going to get to. But this is kind of where that all starts. The next tab breaks down the occupancy by date again. So you can see first, second, third, fourth. Looking at your occupancy, you're looking at your occupancy change, you're looking at your index. Now, the one thing that's added here that we didn't see on the other tabs, and Bianca's pointing to it, is our rank. So as Bianca said in the beginning of the presentation, we're not going to be able to see information for a specific hotel. This is all coming into a kind of a lumped average. So it's our hotel and our set. But we can see how we did here on a ranking scale compared to our set. So you can see here, this hotel was tops in the market in occupancy. Again, we're just looking at occupancy here, all the way through up until December 5th. But overall, they're kind of in that top half of 7 in terms of where they finished each and every day. Right under that, you see occupancy change. So where does that come in? Let's say, for example, your occupancy rank was 5 of 7. But last year, you were 7 of 7. So maybe this year, you're actually going to show your rank being 5 of 7 in occupancy, but your occupancy percent change may be 1 of 7 or 2 of 7. So that continues that idea of the positive trend. If we're showing positive trends, we're moving in the right directions, we know some of our strategies are working, we can get better information and continue to kind of make that progress. And conversely, if we see those trends going down, we know we need to make an adjustment. So that's why those two tabs are similar in terms of how they look, but drastically different in how they're read.
And did you want to show the response, or did you want to go into some other tab?
The other two tabs are honestly, they're the same exact thing as the occupancy. So they're just showing ADR and RevPAR. They're breaking it down percent change, index change, and then of course your rank. So you want to look at all three of these. One thing I didn't say is all the way to the right, if you look, you'll see it says current week, run 28, and run month to date. So those, the current week is what's highlighted by that black box there. And that's obviously going to show your stars and your ranks by the current week. The running 28, as we said, is the rolling 28 days. And your running month to date is your actual month to date. So if you have a month that's 31 days and you're in that 30th day, for example, you can see the total months. But they're all good indicators of how we're trending. And that's really what this is about, and seeing where our trends are. The next tab is the response tab. So this is a nice report to see, or a nice tab to see, because now this is where you're going to see your actual comp set. So you can see here, if you're looking at our star stuff on the sample report, we don't have names in here. This is a sample. So you see 5-star branded, independent 4-star, and I think this report was from 2016. But you're going to see your hotel name here. You're going to see your city, state, zip code, phone number. An important thing here is your total rooms. So we talked about previously about getting your occupancy for your entire market to properly account for your index. This is where you're going to get that information. Right to the right of that, you see a bunch of X's. So what the X's mean is, if you'll see the kind of right a little bit further down, there's a key. And as it says, any X means that both years have been received. So what that means, Bianca was talking about reporting last year versus this year, so you can see your growth or your decline. Any X is saying all of your competitors have reported both years. What can happen sometimes, especially in hotels that are reporting manually, is that they may forget to report. Maybe the person who typically reports went on vacation and didn't get picked up in terms of their responsibilities. So what you may see here now is an L. And it's very possible to see L's or T's on specific days within the same week. So potentially Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they reported both years, Thursday, Friday, they reported just last year. This is important because it obviously is going to skew your numbers as an overall set if a hotel is not reporting both years. Will it change your numbers terribly drastically? It can. Would you completely throw away all the information you're seeing if one hotel is not reporting this year? No. But if all of your hotels are not reporting for some unknown reason, that's something you want to check out with STAR and see, hey, what's going on here? Why is all this information not being reported? Is it a hotel thing? Is it a connection thing? There's got to be some kind of information. So it's definitely important to take a look at this every so often and make sure that your hotels are reporting. One more thing to see, and I've seen this on my hotels, you may also see, you can see where it says blank equals no data. That means that the hotel in your set is just not reporting anymore, period. And that could be for several reasons. One, they've removed themselves from the STAR program. Two, they've closed or renovated into a different type of business, but they have not been removed from your set. So if you do see that, you definitely want to confer with STAR and work on probably getting them switched out, either for another hotel or taken off the report completely.
All right, so we're gonna go back to the closing of our presentation here. And it is the main takeaways in terms of the STAR report. And do you want to do this, David, or?
Really, the main takeaways are to strive for your market share, strive for that 100%, get your fair share, but understand your market as well. Kind of to what Bianca said before, it's very possible that you have a hotel that your comp set is not, I won't say unrealistic, but maybe it's aggressive. So if a hotel is maybe showing 86.7% in terms of index, if you know your competitors are five-star hotel, full-service hotels that are charging maybe $150, $200 more a night than you can achieve, take that into account. And if you get an 86%, that may actually be over a fair share compared to what your market is. So we can kind of describe that more in detail in the questions section if anybody has that has a question on that. But keep your eye on your progress year over year. That's what matters. How are you trending? Are you positive year over year? That's really the big number. It's not always easy to change a comp set. There are a lot of factors that go into it, but if you find yourself in a situation where your comp set is inaccurate because you're scoring too negatively or too positively, figure out why. Make sure that it is because you have a wrong set, and if so, you can start the necessary processes to making adjustments. Don't ignore your secondary tabs. We just talked about how those can break down by day and you can see your ranking. There are some other secondary tabs in there we have not covered today that break down those rankings and numbers by segment on a day-by-day basis. And that's kind of what I was referring to when you're looking at DBR and groups. What was your segmentation last year between transient, contract, and group? Monitor your day of week performance. Compare your Sundays to Sundays, Mondays to Mondays, keeping in mind any holiday shifts. And again, your ranking does matter, both from a ranking standpoint and a percent change standpoint. How are you trending? Again, it goes back to that overall year-over-year data.
Yeah, and just to reinforce, if you do see your revenue manager, your director of revenue manager and property freaking out on Tuesday, give them a little love. They're probably expecting the STAR report, knowing that it's not going to be a good week. And whenever, if you're in sales, someone is quoting you a crazy rate, maybe try to understand why and ask to see the STAR report from last year. It gives you a good leverage to talk to your revenue manager when it comes to that too. And I think with that, we covered it all and we are ready for questions. So you can send a chat if you want. I'm going to unmute everyone. So if you want to ask a question, we're all friends here. You can do so too. And if nobody has questions, it means we did a great job.
Exactly.
All right.
Nobody?
I have one question.
Yeah.
Hi, Bianca. Americo here from
Hi.
a bit far away. No, I have been talking to some properties, and in case they are interested, for a quote, should I refer them to you?
No, actually, you can contact the STAR report directly, and they are going to first check if their competitors are reporting, and then they're going to send them a quote. I don't remember the prices because it's been a while that I don't have the STAR report or to pay for it. But I think it's pretty much the same rate for everybody. It just really depends if the hotels that you want to receive the report from are reporting. So you enter in contact, you reach out to STAR report directly to get the quote.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Bianca. This is Joy. Good morning.
Hi, Joy.
Hi. So I'm curious. Some hotels have closed and some hotels have not closed. You know, these counties are saying you're only really allowed to be open for essential business, and everybody's taking that rule differently. What is STAR going to do for data then to compare? Because are they going to show them as being closed, or?
That's a great point. I think that by the end of this and when things go back to normal, they should release some kind of guideline to see what hotels should do, because you're right, there is a lot of hotels that are closed, some they're not. So next year when you're going to be looking at the numbers, how are you going to compare yourself? I assume that they should release some guidelines. David, you're furloughed. I'm not sure if you heard anything from them as you're still on property.
No, I mean, I'm not going into property, but I have been on a number of different webinars from STAR, official STAR presenters. And again, we're not officially working for STAR under STAR's umbrella in any regard. But from what I've heard, they're kind of, I think, still working that out as well. We're in uncharted territory, unfortunately. I don't think, at least no time recently, have we ever seen so many hotels closed so fast in such large numbers. And I'm sure STAR is trying to figure out how they're going to be able to report this accurately with so many hotels being closed. And I would imagine there'll be an update as we kind of return to normalcy, but I don't think there's been an official memo on that yet.
Well, because they're not all closed at the same date or open the same date. I was on a task force call yesterday, and the Four Seasons in Santa Barbara said, we don't know how to open because we don't have a parking lot even nearby, and all of our guests have to valet park, but yet we're not allowed to get in strangers' cars. So they're saying they can't even open until the county allows the valet operation to resume. And so everybody's going to start opening at different dates, I think. It's
I
going
mean,
to be
the truth is, and again, this is just my opinion, the truth is that we're going to see some wonky STAR reports next year. We're going to see growth year over year. I think a lot, both for us and the set. But there's going to be a lot of wonky stuff, and that's going to kind of go back to that response tab. You potentially may just see, if you look at that response tab, you see a lot of T's. That would indicate that, and again, we're looking a year ahead from now. If you see a lot of T's there, that's probably going to be the indicator that a hotel was closed at that time, because they're only reporting numbers for this year. And that could potentially give you an idea of, when you're looking at the report, how many hotels were closed at this specific time. And maybe that would help you identify how valid the information actually is. But I'm not 100% sure on that yet. There's been no official notice that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I feel it's almost like when you're a kid and everybody's playing and someone does something wrong and you're like, well, let's start over again. I feel it's going to be almost like that for the STAR report when it comes to data analytics, in the sense that, you know, from March to April, nobody plays this game. Let's look in you know, from June on, because there is no really accurate data to look at. And as we said before, is the data that people are entering now even accurate? Because you have the front desk is furloughed, you have maybe one person on property. Are they even taking care really of entering the data correctly? Probably not. So I think it's going to be a black hole in our reports, unfortunately, for the next 3 years, because we're always going to look into 2020 and it's like, oh yeah, 2020, all of that happened. But I do hope, as David is saying, we don't work with STAR officially, but I do hope that they come out with some type of guideline for us to, you know, to have at least a reference for next year.
Good question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Well, if it,
So someone jumped in.
Sorry, hi Bianca, it's Pete. How are
hi, good. How about you?
you? Hey, listen, just as a PS to all of that, I think when you're talking about the data, I think it's important that if you're in a market where some of your comp set hotels or your own hotel have housed, you know, critical workers or government employees that came in for task force, things like that. That's going to skew the data as well. I know one of the hotels I was task forcing for, they had, a National Guard block that comes in. And so it's all going to be very wonky. And so I think you really need to dig deep when you come to budgeting for next year, and
Yes.
you start looking at the numbers, and you look at your comp set of your numbers, and it's going to be, affecting everything, your occupancy, your rate, and your RevPAR. So I think you have to just remind people to, don't look at the data for face value. You really have to peel the onion and see what was driving that, as we all do. But that's just a wild card that I think that, we might forget when we're looking at some of this data.
You're absolutely right. And I was just thinking, especially if you're giving sales professionals goals, and you just said we had a group with the National Guard, and next year you give the group salesperson the same goals, right, as we had this year, but yet this year you had things that will definitely not happen next year, hopefully. So yeah, you're right. It's going to be.
We increase the sales manager's goals regardless. It doesn't have any.
Well, I'm not in sales right now, so.
It's going to be a very interesting budget season this year.
Yeah.
And, the interesting part about it is a lot of these hotels, at least from what we're thinking, hopefully as a general market, is that a lot of these hotels are going to ramp back up, hopefully in the next few months. And if you're a hotel that opens up July, August, well, you're opening up basically right back into budget season. So it's going to be very interesting, to say the least, of how all this comes together, as we all work together to figure this out, because it's we're in such uncharted territory for everybody that's been in, whether you've been in hotels for a year or 40 years. I've heard pretty much across the board people say that they've never seen anything like this before.
Yeah.
And just because the hotels are cleared for takeoff, so to speak, and are able to reopen, if you're in a destination market, you're not going to get that same incentive business or group business, because of the whole social distancing and corporate policies, but the airlines aren't going to come back as quickly as the hotels are. They're dumping seats and inventory and parking planes and everything else. You're not going to have lift into these markets, some of these markets. So.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah,
So
it's a lot of
key to that is if you are currently working, or if you're someone who's in charge of a lot of this stuff, please take down notes, make records of everything going on that's affecting this stuff, so that when you do look back a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, you can easily refer and say X, Y, and Z happened. My market reopened on X date. My market reclosed on Y date. Whatever's happening, take notes so that you can easily refer to it, because it's going to be important.
Yeah, strange times, that's for sure. And if you guys have any questions about revenue management that you would like to see a presentation about, David and I were talking about maybe covering what goes into quoting groups, because we know there is so much friction between sales and revenue management when it comes to that. What the hell do we think when we're quoting these rates for groups? But I think there's so much work that we do on the back end. And maybe if you're interested, please drop us a line and we can definitely cover that from, again, our perspective, what goes into quoting group rates. Or if there's anything really revenue related that you would like to learn more, we'd love to, to show you. Again, we are not doing much. I'm especially not doing much at all. So I'd love to cover that for you. So we'd like to continue this for as long as this quarantine lasts. But I appreciate everybody dialing in and seeing the presentation. Thank you.
Any other last questions?
I just want to say congratulations to you all. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's all I was going to say too.
Thank you. Sorry.
Very good presentation, and I look forward to whatever extra you're doing. Having Zoom calls and presentations and podcasts gets me awake and dressed and showered and at my desk, even if I don't have anything doing that day. So I love it.
Oh, thank you, Carrie. You look great.
Thank you.
So, thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it. Hope to see you
Bye.
guys back.
Thanks. Bye-bye.